Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. This is the first of several webinars that we're going to have for the next several Fridays with this EA Post project. Today, Beth Chance and Sherry Johnson will be presenting a student activity called Sampling Names. Next Friday, Laura Callis will be presenting an activity involving paper airplanes. We're not sure exactly what's going to happen 2 weeks from today, but something will. And then on January 30th, Laura and Jen McNally at Curry College will be presenting the launch of their new website project. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Beth and Sherry. But a little bit of further ado, Beth is a professor at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California. Sherry teaches at Kennesaw State University in Georgia. And they'll tell you what they're going to present. Let me be quiet now and turn it over to Beth and Sherry.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sherry Johnson, and I'm one of the EAPOST scholars and have had the opportunity to work with Beth this last semester and really understand some of these applets a little bit better and have the opportunity to take one of my passions, which is trying to engage students in we have not very large, but to us, very large lecture classes for introductory statistics. So a focus on using student data is one of the ways I try to engage the students in the class. So as a warm-up question, just something for you to think about. So don't answer and hit enter yet, but if you want to type it in chat, and then we're going to waterfall it a little bit. So if you were to use student data in the classroom, what is a variable of interest you would like to collect? And also, why would you be interested in collecting that data? So give a little while for you guys to think, to reply, and maybe about 30 more seconds, and we'll tell you guys to hit the enter button. I think I still see a couple of thoughtful typing faces, but what do you think, Beth? You think it's about time to hit enter?
Sure.
Sure, go ahead and hit enter. Let's see what we have. Oh, number of siblings. I always think birth order is so interesting. Social media, study hours, pets. Pets always seems to be a general good interest and sort of reduces some anxieties for students, I think. Hours of sleep. Thank you, Rick. I will pay you later. We're going to be talking about hours of sleep in one of our activities. So, appreciate everybody's thoughtful answers. And we're going to be basically breaking today's session into 5 different parts. First of all, we're going to take a look at the sampling words applet that traditionally includes the Gettysburg Address words, as well as several other pre-stored data sets, as well as the ability to import your own data. And we have a multivariable CVS for you guys to upload. So we're going to be asking you to upload a file. And then we're going to take a look at some activities that I did in my large intro stats classroom. And Beth is also going to talk about how we improved the applet or added some additional features to it. So there's kind of a one-stop place where students can go and learn multiple different contexts. Then we're going to give you guys some time in some breakout rooms where you can chat with some colleagues about how you could use student data and or this applet in your class and maybe have some time to share out. And then we'll be sharing some ePost Scholar resources with you in case you are interested in looking at some other things that many of you, I am imagining, have helped develop. So I'm going to hand this part over to Beth. I think you're muted. Can I unmute you?
I'm good. How's
Oh,
that?
there you go.
So we've talked about this sampling words activity before, and so one of the things we'll want to point you to is where you can find some resources or an earlier webinar where we talk through this activity. But I just wanted to give a little bit of context today to kind of better understand how Sherry improved upon it or followed up with it. So I often use this activity early on in the course when I want to teach students about bias sampling and random sampling. And the way I do it now is I get them to an online form where all they have to do is check. I'm just clicking on 10 words and I say 10 representative words and they're like, well, what do you mean by representative? And I'm like, well, you tell me. And, that's the conversation we're going to have. But what's nice about this applet is it collects their words. It asks them to compute the average length. If they get it wrong, it then gives them the word lengths. And so then hopefully they can get it right the next time. And I don't know if I can do this quickly. 4.5 maybe? Help me out. 7? No, I'm just guessing. So yeah, it won't let them go on until they get it right. Isn't that convenient? 30. What am I doing wrong?
About 3.5.
Thank you. Then it enters their name, and you can set this up so that you're one of the instructors on this list. When you give them the URL, then your name will come up. So I'll just call this test, and maybe I don't know if there's any in here under my name or not. But then it gives them links where it can take them to just the data. It could take them to all the data. It could just take them to the data for your students, or it can pump them right into the applet, and so they can start playing with it in this descriptive statistics applet. But when we do it in class, so now I want to see if I can go back to,
So are you wanting to share your screen? Or I think it's still on my screen share. Is that
no, I was
at
sharing. Did you
least my
see any of that?
at least my screen is still highlighted green on the slide.
What do you see now?
Sampling words activity with the dot plot with the X's and one circle.
I
Okay,
can maybe I have
Yeah.
to stop sharing first.
I think we
Yeah,
can
maybe
toggle
so.
between the two screens.
because it's multiple, it's set up for multiple people.
Yeah. So
Oh,
right.
up at the top,
Yeah.
there's a Beth's screen
I,
that still says sampling
I
words
think maybe
activity.
Sherry needs to stop sharing.
Easiest for,
I could be wrong.
I'll stop sharing.
all right. So yeah, there's a link. So actually one thing we should have pointed out, and maybe Ellen, you can do this real quick, is if you follow this link, we'll give you access to the slides, and then you can follow a lot of these links in the slides as well. So while you're pulling that up, I'll go back to kind of this form. So anyway, I do have students just pick a sample of 10 words, and then I collect either the proportion that are short or just the average length. So here's a graph to the right of what happened in class recently where they reported their proportion of short words. And so a lot of students end up with 0 or maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 of their words being short. And so when we look at this graph, we can then compare it to the actual population proportion, which is 0.41. And we see that not everybody's below it, but there's definitely this systematic tendency to underestimate the proportion of short. And I really like giving them this kind of concrete, tangible, hands-on visual. They're one of those X's, right? And so by participating in this experience, I think they have a deeper understanding of what it means to be a bias sampling method, that we need to look at lots of different results to see if we have the systematic tendency, and that taking a representative sample maybe isn't as interesting as or as easy as they might thought it would be. And then we go on to using the applet that Sherry was mentioning. I'm going to follow this applet, but the link we want to give you is actually going to have the word test in here as we're playing with some new things. But if you say population equals Gettysburg, then it takes you right into that Gettysburg data. So here's the 268 words in the Gettysburg Address. So 407 years ago, students still pretty much recognize this. And you can look at the average length, or you could look at whether or not the word was short. And then this allows you to take samples from that population and build up a sampling distribution. So maybe I'll take like 1,000 samples of size. I actually have them go to size 5 and see that that even does a better job of being centered near the population value. Now I said 0.41 before because we put this new feature that you can change which outcome you want to be the one that's graphed. So here we can see them centering around that 0.41 or roughly, but definitely a much better job than what the haphazard samples were doing. And so we introduce students to the idea of sampling frame, maybe even different sampling methods. And then once you're in the applet, you can keep using that to explore a lot of different things. Like you can change the population size, changing the sample size, of course, and then you can try lots of different populations. And so that ability to go to different populations, I think, is part of what Sherry wanted to make sure we could do a really good job at. And that's what she's going to be talking about next. So the goals of what Sherry came up with are, maintaining this focus on sampling variability, just introducing the idea of a sampling distribution in a way that, again, it's very concrete for students, very tactile. They get some comfort with it. And then how does that match up with the theoretical results, like the standard deviation and the central limit theorem for the shape, but also adapting it, as she mentioned, for her larger class size and making sure that there's enough support for the students to understand what's going on while increasing that engagement and connection to the context and the classroom community. So I will stop sharing. Back to you, Sherry.
Awesome. And then I can find the share button and choose my correct screen. I will go back to sharing and oop, that one. Yes. Okay.
That one too far.
Sorry, my seems to be having a little bit of a delay that I don't know if it's because it's on Zoom, but I got overly anxious there and didn't see it reloading and went ahead. But we are back on. Yeah, so I am leading some efforts here at Kennesaw as we transition from smaller to larger intro stats classes. And we're trying to find ways to, not have chaos happen with large class sizes and still engage students. So looking at some challenges with large classes, for me, one of the challenges was, oh, if I've got 120 students in my class, how am I going to remember their names? How am I really going to get to know them and focus on their thinking? And I found that name tents were helpful in allowing me to use their name, as well as collecting some data up front because students are naturally interested in data about themselves. But in a large class, to collect data within a class takes a lot of time because you have a lot of straggling students and you're not going to get full responses. So I wanted to use student data and collected a lot of it up front. So one thing I created, and there's a link here that will link you to the Google Forms that I created for what I called a getting to know you survey, which allowed me to collect a lot of information up front. So that is the basis of this multivariable file. Then you can use throughout the semester to use the student data to talk about different concepts as the course progresses. And a note, because I also wanted to look at, similar to the Gettysburg Address, the student's name length. I thought that would be an accessible quantitative variable to focus on. So I did some work in the spreadsheet before I created the CSV file to be uploaded to the applet and created a couple of new variables that are dependent upon that first name. So two that we created were first name length, and then for a categorical variable, does the first name start with a vowel, false or true? So we've got some additional comments about working with files because when I first tried to upload the file, I was like, whoa, what's happening? What's going on? But one of the things that you do have to be careful with in the applet is to make sure that there's no spaces in the variable names. So the actual questions from my Google survey, I modified those to be more variable names, so then it would upload into the applet without an error. And then simply just saved it as a CSV file and was able to upload that as data as an alternative to the Gettysburg Address. So uh, I'm going to share or show you in just a moment how to upload the file. But one comment before we did that, when I just uploaded all of the variable information for the name length, I had more records, 346. However, when I used the multivariable file, the population size now was much smaller, 297, because as the file loads, if there's other fields that are blank, those are not going to be included in the data set. So you might get different values for your population or your samples that you're sampling from them based on whether you're using this multivariable set or whether you just copy and paste all of the information for one variable. So now it's your turn to go ahead and upload a file. So if you just click on the file and download it to your screen, to your computer, and then open the applet, and I'll go ahead and do this. So there's the file, and if I say file, download.
So I copied in again the URL for the materials where they can click on the file. And also, I think I might have copied in a URL that goes to the file directly. So hopefully one of those works. But if you're having trouble, let us know.
Thank you. And then the applet, where you have some preloaded sleep variables as well as the Gettysburg Address data. But at the very bottom, there is a choose file where you can then select that CSV file that you just downloaded, and that will upload the data to the applet. Here it has detected and skipped 49 lines. So there's 49 records that aren't going to be included. And then we can hit use data. Do you have to hit use data there? Because I noticed it's not green. Sometimes that is green and it's like,
I think we want it to be green here, yeah. But talk about the vertical layout or undo that so we can see if it's changed, yeah. So you may not have to hit use data if you're doing the file upload version.
yeah, I think in the file upload, it automatically loads the data in and gives you this population graph and just chooses maybe the first variable as the variable that's here. But now we have the ability within this multivariable file to say, okay, we maybe don't want to look at the last name length. We might want to look at the first name length. But we've got all these other variables from our survey. Pets, do you prefer dogs or cats? I know Alan's response would be that he prefers cats.
Right.
And many other questions. Here we have a lot of first generation students that we try to come along beside and support. And that was one we felt important to include on the survey. So whatever you include in your file will be available through the applet to both look at the population data as well as show the sampling distributions. And whether you want this as a horizontal layout or clicking this vertical layout over here allows you to see one on top of the other. And then if we were to take for last names, we actually did sample sizes of 3 and say draw 1,000 samples, and you can see the population data, the most recent sample, and then the sampled statistics, the actually sampling distribution that also references this population mean as well.
I'm sorry, Sherry, can you go up again about how to change from horizontal to vertical? Where is that?
Yeah, sure. And sometimes when you load some of the files in, it may be, I don't know if my computer is like remembering my formatting settings, but sometimes if you have many variables, you might have a very wide window for your data. And if you decrease the width of that window, then you see these options to the right that include show sampling options as well as this vertical layout toggle. This just toggles between your graphs being horizontal or your graphs being more of a vertical layout. I know there's a couple of other applets that show like from the population you sample from a population, and here are the blue dots on the population graph are the ones that were included in the most recent sample. And then you can see resulting from all of these samples, 1,000 samples, here's your sampling distribution.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see that vertical button on mine. I don't know why, but
And if you widen your window,
I think you have to press to click on show the sampling options, then I saw it.
oh, yeah, if you don't have
oh, I see it. Yes.
if
Oh, okay. Thank you.
yes, great call. Thank you. Because if you don't have show the sampling options on, it's just going to be showing you the population data. Once you see the sampling options, then if you want to see the vertical layout with the most recent sample and the sampling distribution, then that button is there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yes, great question. Thanks for asking. So it's wonderful flexibility to be able to use our own data, and I think very engaging to the students to be able to use their data. And that brings us to the activities that I did in the classroom with the help of Beth's expertise in so many ways. So I was interested in, I had a few restrictions. We use a particular book and it's not a simulation-based inference book. And I wanted to introduce some simulation-based inference and get the students using some applets and some of their own data. So we thought we would work with the sampling distributions was good timing for us. And within my large class throughout the semester, I frequently talk about, you know, us as a class of 120 students, we could be a sample if we were making inferences about some larger group, maybe all intro stats classes. We service thousands of intro stats students each semester, or maybe the university at large. But we can also think of our class as a population and take a sample from that population. And that's the beginning thoughts for these activities of, well, let's take samples from our class data. And the book that we use has a nice example, and we used some guided notes, and my example had n equals to 3 for the sample means for the central limit theorem. So I just chose to be consistent with that and have them get in groups of 3 and to record their names. Now, this was a table we actually added after the activity. I noticed as the students were trying to come up with the average length for their group of 3, that it was a little bit of a challenge. And I also wanted this to be a community building activity where you're making a large classroom not feel so large and getting to know your small group and your students that are sitting around you. So I added this table so they would have a chance to write down each other's names and a place to compute their average before they report that average out. So for the sample means, and linked here in the slides are both a handout as well as an answer key for the handout. And in our information on where you had the link to the Google Drive that has all of the information, there's also a sampling distributions class slides. So if you're interested in looking at the slide deck that goes along with these, happy to share that information. For the purposes of today, I'm going to focus more on the actual answer key for the X bar distribution. So you can also see where we have added some teacher notes as well as just the answers to the questions. So we looked at some of their own data and the population data for both the last name length and the first name length. And you can look at these two graphs and have them compare the mean, the standard deviation. Oh, it looks like last names are generally longer than first names, 6.7 compared to 5.9. But I had them do these first 3 questions in their group and then prepare to have each group have a person to report their values out, their sample means. And this is another one that we changed. Initially, they were just recording the numbers here, but I think plotting the numbers so they can begin to see the distribution is a better use of their time and recording. And then to introduce the actual symbols, and this brought up an interesting conversation between Beth and I because students struggle with these symbols. I mean, I have students by the end of the semester that is like, now what is X bar versus mu? And then of course, when you get to mu sub p hat, or mu sub X bar, that is a mouthful. So with our book, we do use the symbols, but we've tried within these activities and the handouts to, in most places, include both the words as well as the symbol. So when they're looking at, oh, this is the standard deviation of the sample mean, this mu sub X bar, they can reason across those representations and start to come to know those symbols so that they can operate with them. So we have them make a guess of, based on the numbers that they plotted, what do they think the mean and the standard deviation might be for this distribution. And then we have them take a look as we use the sampling words applet to take many samples from the data. So in number 6, their task is to be recording that data. We'll just take a quick look at the class slides on here. And so as they get, that one's for proportions. I should have been, there's our 4-score. So looking at the handout from how it flowed through the class, we've got, they complete 1 through 3, they plot the values, they guess the numbers for number 5, then they watch as we show how to use the applet, and then they have an opportunity to use the applet themselves.
Sherry, I'm sorry. This is Rick Powers. I just wanted to ask a question about the process. Um, do you have people with compound last names that or first names like Mary Ann or like Smith Reynolds for their last name, that would be something. I know that sometimes in student services they have trouble with people that have multiple names that they call their first name or their last name. I don't know if that ever came up.
You know, I did on my survey ask them what is their preferred name. And
Mm,
I think also in this population data, because I think, no, this came from the whole, maybe it was in a different class. I remember one being kind of an extreme outlier because it seemed to be a hyphenated last name
right.
that both of them were very long. And that, I think that gives you an opportunity to talk about both data cleansing, if like by chance the middle name gets included with the last name instead of somewhere
Mhm.
else, as well as outliers if you have something that is extremely long.
And I guess I just have just a minor concern about if somebody has a name such as that they might feel like they're being called out, even though it's anonymous, right? They see themselves as being like very unusual compared to everybody else. But that's something that, anybody that has a weird name probably has to have that internal
Yeah,
thing,
and
right?
and we did on the survey, I put something on there that said, I'll only share the anonymized data with you. So you will see like one of them that sparked pretty good discussion was like, how many miles from campus do you live? And people start talking about their commute times and traffic and um but I think I haven't heard anything back, like in my course evaluations or from students about, but I'm sure there's so many different sensitivities and what you put up. But
Yeah, and
I
just
think
to mention something about the fact that if you have a really long name, you might feel called out by this, but rest assured that we're not doing that, so that they know that they're not going to be identified or something like that.
right, right. Like you might be able to identify yourself here on the graph. But our purpose is really to be looking at the distribution of data.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a great suggestion. Okay, so we developed an activity for the sample means, and that was here's the answer key for that one. So after they watch with the last name, we transition to this variable of sleep that is a data set that is maintained within the applet. And it's the student's turn now to look at the 2 different sleep distributions. And if we hop over to the applet, you can quickly see that sleep 1, and here's the green use data button. So now we'll transition to the sleep data. sleep 1 appears to be fairly normally distributed. But if we look at this sleep 2 variable and say use data, that appears to be skewed. So we can repeatedly sample with the same sample size to see when this sampling distribution is going to be normal. And on our handout, we have them identify what the approximate shape of each of these are, and then respond to the question of when is the shape skewed. The students in my class seem to struggle. I seem to need a little bit more scaffolding with this. I don't know if it was the way, I don't think we had approximate shape here, or we had something different in the instructions. But that was a little bit of a challenge. I think they were afraid they were going to get it wrong, or sometimes it's, when it's approximately normal or skewed, somebody might see it one way and another person might see it a different way. So that brings us to actually then giving them the standard deviation for the sample mean formula, where it is related to the sample size, and then we ask them to compute the standard error for several sample sizes and then compare this theoretical value back to this simulated value that they did back in question 6. So we ended up doing a similar activity for proportions. So you'll see that the handout and the answer key for the proportions look very similar and follows a similar process. In this instance, the book that we were using had an example with a sample size of 5. So I had them get into groups of 5 and then compute their proportion faults for starts with a vowel. And similarly, we looked at their data and had them plot the distribution and then record the values as we showed the applet, and then gave them a chance to look at the words with the Gettysburg Address and look at what the simulated standard deviations were, and also the shape of those distributions, and talked about the actual formula for it and computing the values. And then the summary slides includes some kind of summarizing and putting the pieces together in terms of what is the central limit theorem saying, how can we relate it to how we use this applet. Oh, when n was 30, if the population was skewed, we ended up with a normally looking, approximately normal distribution. But if we had a really small sample size, then it was this sampling distribution was still skewed. So one of as we were talking about the actual symbols, and I wanted to share with you guys one of the strategies I've been trying to use. So we use name tents in the class, so I can more easily use student names throughout the class. And after I taught the first semester, I was getting ready to just give them some blank card stocks. And I was like, hey, wait a minute. Let me give them a gift on the back side of their name tent. So I put together a summary that is consistent with our book of all of the symbols that we use, and not just the symbols and what they mean, but in some instances, how to pronounce them, like mu sub p hat and sigma sub p hat. And I did get really good feedback from students on that they found it very helpful. So happy to share that with you guys. And once again, just wanted to thank Beth for all of her support and direction and having these awesome free applets and being willing to share and improve on them.
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway, or one of the key takeaways is hearing your ideas and what you wanted to do is very helpful to me, so that this would be a much better way to use the applet. And so as you saw, being able to toggle which outcome is the success, being able to overlay that theoretical distribution. Now, once you have the multiple variables in there, you can just kind of hit the down arrow and you just scroll through all these different distributions really quickly. The vertical layout. I mean, I think it's what we would like to hear from you all is what would make doing activities like this more feasible for you in your own classes. So I think we still want to try and do a real brief little breakout. We're going to break into probably 3 rooms, just randomly assign you. You may not even have time to introduce yourself to each other, but we wanted to require you to do a little brainstorming on could you do something like this in your own classes? What would you need to change? And if you have ideas on what about the technology or the applet specifically would need to change, we're going to ask you to share out with that at the end as well. So Alan, are you doing this or am I?
I'll do it. You'll be assigned to a breakout room. Go ahead and go there. Maybe 6 minutes or so, you think, something like that. We'll figure that out. So let me hit the create button. I'll hit the open all rooms button. Can you see your, can you see
Yeah,
breakout people leaving?
yeah.
Looks like the default was 5 minutes, and I didn't see where I could change the default.
All right, I'm moving Sherry to room 3.
Laura will go to 2.
Yeah.
Do you need us to go in there?
I think it's up to you.
uh, Rosamond Chan's applet collection website? Because I don't find it on the website. Has the link to the
Try
website
sampling
changed?
words is the same. So on the
Mm.
left, it says sampling words, and it also says sampling from a finite population.
Yes, thank you.
But do be warned, what you're getting on the web page right now is slightly different than what we demoed today because we're still making sure it works before we move it over to the main page. Any other votes for more breakout or reporting back on the breakouts? I mean, I can steal a question from our room if you want. The big question again was time. Or maybe Sherry, maybe you could reflect on when you used it in the course and how you found enough time in the course to do more of this active learning, what your experience was.
Yeah, time is a precious commodity, huh? Um, but I think you know, the feedback that I got from students, and it's always a mixed bag of there were some people on my midterm check-in. I just ask them, how's the class going so I can make some modifications before the semester is over. I don't want them just to give me feedback at the end. Um, More than not, I heard I want more activities like I think the first one we did, Beth, was the random babies one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that introduced them to them being the driver in the data and not just receiving information and doing homework problems and practicing. And I think too, I was just reviewing our so we have a departmental final and we look at how our students did, and then identify, what changes did you say you were going to do, and what did you do, and what are you going to plan to do for next time? And I think one of mine that improved, I think, was related to a deeper conceptual understanding of what's going on under the hood for all of these confidence intervals and hypothesis tests, that so many of the students, if they don't understand what's going on, they just memorize the procedure and get the right number and report it back. So I I think for me, I carved out some time by saying, okay, I'm going to go a little bit faster here, and I'm going to reserve a day like for each unit in order to do more of an activity as opposed to them just working problems or going through our guided notes. So I think it's a balance, and if you see the need and the benefit from it, and I think I've already seen some of the benefit from it, that will encourage you to carve out some more time.
And in our conversations too, you also often talked about how much it kind of helped to stick with the same applet for a few days because once you get past that learning curve, then you're able to do a lot more with it.
Um,
Yes. And there was someone in our section who was talking about just using the Gettysburg Address. And I didn't start with that last semester, but I think this semester I'm going to start using this applet from the beginning. And if they know that one place to go and you can do multiple things in there, I think it's gonna be easier for them.
I just wanted to mention that we had in our group, we noticed that on your class slides that you have um, conceptual foundations where you say, what does the standard deviation measure? That's actually something you talk about before you do the activity. And so that you're not just saying, well, let's all go in here and do an activity, but you're preloading it with the concepts and so that they have a good context, a good, if you want to say, cognitive context for what you're going to do. You say, this is what we're looking for, and now we're going to see it. And so then even those basic ideas, what is the standard deviation, even in the first place, that they have that going in.
Yes, and that actual slide in the class slides was one of the kind of big takeaways or synopsis of after doing the random babies activity was, okay, what does this standard deviation really mean? So it tied back to a previous activity, which I think was really nice.
And that maybe relates to a question we got earlier about do you have students do certain topics or activities before they come into class? Do you assign?
And if you do assign, which ones are going to have that done and which ones are not? Is always the challenge. But I think activities in the classroom also give an opportunity for students who are maybe doing the bare minimum and just focusing on the answers to have to think it out with some other folks.
Well, and peer, if you want to say peer pressure, right? But peer encouragement, let's call it that, where you have like three people and one of them says, well, I don't know anything about what's going on. And then the other two are like, oh, well, I did this and I read this in the textbook and I saw this video. Maybe next time they'll say, maybe I should actually be prepared, right?
Hmm.
But it's not coming from you. If it's people in the classroom, they can hear that much better and internalize it, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wonder if three is even a better group size than two. Like they might be less willing to admit it to just one other person.
Right. Yeah. Three, I think
I
is
didn't think of that. Other thoughts or reflections or sharing out from your breakout rooms? things you want to see changed in the applet.
As soon as they start using it, they might be thinking of additional things now that they know that you're so adaptive.
Just wondering with the applet, could there be an option for having it select with and with or without replacement?
That's a great idea. And I haven't done it in the applets. What we focused on instead was maybe a stratified sampling and being able to have more strata in there. There is a bootstrapping applet, and that basically is sampling with replacement, whereas everything else would be sampling without replacement.
Okay.
And a lot of the applets, let me see if I can share.
Sharing.
I think we're fine. Like it's just down here at the bottom if they want to kind of go over to the other one. And you can see what I'm saying, sharing.
Yes.
If they do that, you know, I definitely spend some time here or try and come up with a situation where you have to match the sample size. So it really is about bootstrapping, but then they might see that the same result comes up more than once here. And so we do talk a little bit about how that's different from the other one, but then we try and make it pretty easy to go back and forth between them. So yeah, that could be another pull down on the same applet if you like that. The other thing I do a fair bit with this applet is take too big a sample in the sense that you kind of violate that large sample principle, and then we look at the standard deviation and how that's impacted when you can't really assume it's more than 10 or 20 times the size of a sample. And I think the only other thing we wanted to make sure you're watching is just the resources page on the EAPOST website, or if there's ways we can improve how these are organized or anything like that. But we try and give you the study context, the applet that it's using, what statistical methods are being covered. And as we do more and more of these Scholar programs, we're going to hopefully be adding to this resource list, or if you have something you think would be a nice addition that kind of has the same idea of, you know, maybe using simulation more or having more of that focus on conceptual understanding and active learning, we'd love to continue to expand this list.
Remember, we will have additional webinars the next 3 Fridays. I'll be sending out the Zoom links. It'll be a different Zoom link each week, but I'll send it out at least a few days in advance. Any last questions for Beth or Sherry?
Thank you all for coming and your ideas.
Yeah, appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too.
Yeah, nice to see the additions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to get ideas.
Happy New Year.